"Attention on deck!" someone said, screaming it so loud they would probably need a lozenge. He stepped into the hangar surprised that his entourage and staff were actually standing at attention, let alone in actual ranks. Many of the risk eaters and deathless soldiers, a part of his personal staff, had been criticized as being braceless derelicts, and in his own opinion many of them were, which, of course, was the way he liked it. Numerous reports had been filed against him for excessive violence and naked threats of it. Some even went as far as suspecting Deicide of having a secret police force within risk eaters. Absurd, because he would never pull troops of such high profile, especially his favorites, for his own underhanded schemes. Even weavers, who specialized in clandestine activities, were never abused in such a way. Still, he had people who would fit the description of such a Gestapo, men with faces most could not recall, and it would against self-interest if one did recollect. Deicide shot them all an odd glance, and was saluted by the chief commanders of his army, their fists leaving their lips nearly in unison. He then looked back to his special division, surprised to see them all shaven, showered, and in the uniform of the day. He plodded over to one of the officers in charge, her hair in a perfect bun, lips tight, and eyes at 1,000-yard stare. He continued through the ranks, coming to a group of his favorites. Baby Sister narrowed her eyes as he approached. Her hair, which normally had a wild and random quality about it, had been tamed back into a reddish-brown bun. She leaned toward him slightly. "I hope you're enjoying this," she said, through her sharpened teeth. Deicide straightened her collar, but snatched his fingers away when she snapped her jaws at him. It was just one of the hostile gestures an eater could perform, though Baby Sister meant it in jest. Dueling was common amongst the eaters, even the regular soldiers, but anyone calling out Deicide will be crushed on the spot. The Lord had not been challenged for centuries, and he was eager to test extreme conditions of his kill box on a living participant. He turned around to see if anyone noticed the exchange, then saw Hellmouth craning her neck as she moved between the ranks of the soldiers, hand pressed firmly in her back. The woman could smell dissent in horseplay. "I actually prefer your nappy, just got out of bed look," Deicide said before moving on. He stopped again when he had come to another one of his veterans, Hash, a man whom he had never seen with a clean chin. He wore the same patch as Baby Sis, the throne and sleeping wolves. Deicide grinned slightly, and then brushed the man's brown chin with his finger. The man grumbled and shifted his jaw. Deicide nodded and squeezed the man's arm. He possessed the same temperament as his mother, who had also been a career soldier. "I don't know what they had to do to you to shave this," Deicide said. His grin only grew wider when he saw the bite marks on Hash's left ear. "Ah, you've been chosen, I see," Deicide said. "And why have I not met this young lady?" "She just went on deployment, sir," Hash said. "She's a periphery scout." "Scout, eh?" Deicide said, chuckling at how similar their tastes were. His mother had been a scout as well, her love nearly as mean as her hate was of the enemy. Deicide rubbed his left ear, remembering the day she had bit it, restarting this ghastly tradition. Unfortunate that she had become a traitor. They might have still been together, but would she tolerate their naturally birthed children, or would she devour them whole, like Kronos? "Carry on, everyone," he said. Immediately the eaters exhaled and began chatting with each other, falling out of ranks to lean against the cars in the motor pool. He removed himself from the now ragged columns of eaters and approached the front. Iker, the Weaver chief commander, a grade 3 eater, gave a knowing nod, then came to his side. His skin was old, but taut, pulled across his lean body like a leather-upholstered skeleton, arms chiseled like limestone racked with vines. His teeth, like many high-ranking eaters, began to take on a predatory quality, and he spoke in a sort of hushed growl. Even though the man was a weaver, he had been out of the field for decades, and had no need to conceal his identity. "Did my people speak with you?" Iker said. Because of the man's height, many were surprised at his career choice. Most weavers were of an unassuming stature. Even their faces were nondescript. Deicide had never seen a weaver that he thought of as anything but plain. Iker attempted to dip down slightly, but Deicide, who was a tall man himself, still had to crane his neck up to look at him. "Yes, are the vehicles ready?" Deicide said. "They're good to go. Are you sure you don't want to reschedule?" Iker said, eyes scanning the room. Weavers and risk eaters never seemed to look directly at the person whom they were speaking to. Defense mechanism or nervous tick It had always annoyed Deicide. "I've already rescheduled twice. I have my political responsibilities," Deicide said. "The boy I remember training was a warrior, not a politician," Acre said. "True, old friend, but he was also naive to the realities of the world. The people we're meeting today are like-minded, rational," Deicide said. He playfully punched the man and then stuck his finger in the air and made a circular motion. The signal was repeated in the form of Hellmouth's voice, and everyone hurried to their designated vehicles. Deicide hopped into a car that could only be described as a shiny, long, floating tank. Inside, everyone was already seated, and he crouch-walked toward the back, where there was an empty spot between Hellmouth and the Great White. He nodded to his political theorists, Destra and Sinestra, twins of his recent late admirals. Like their parents, they were of a conservative sort, and though they always dressed mildly, their natural beauty hindered their attempts to downplay their features. "Nobody wants to sit with the old people, I guess," Deicide said, falling into his seat. The abyss had slunk to his front. She curled into a multi-eyed sphere and sat on his lap. Hellmouth cocked an eyebrow and leaned away from the creature. There were very few on board that thought of the alien creature as anything pet-like or even remotely cute, especially after urban legends surfaced that the vile thing was cancerous. Yet inert samples of this very same creature flowed inside the bladders of the skids they wore beneath their uniforms, guarding them from varieties of physical attacks, including numerous calibers of ammunition. The apartheid gate technicians use a one-for-one system in operating the gates. 2 gates can never be opened at the same time. The previous door must be closed before the next one would open. It was a tiresome process, but Deicide felt Knott had put the system in place for a reason. He continued molding and prodding at the abyss, the matching game the two played when idle. She would form a shape, and then it was up to him to mold her into it again. The members of his entourage, not paid to think, spoke of the new season of shows that will be broadcasted soon, celebrity rumors, and other benign but thoughtless topics. Deicide thought that if he closed his eyes, he could imagine he was in a car with a group of normal, well-adjusted young adults, but Baby Sister's shrill voice and Great White's morbid humor would not allow him to forget that he was surrounded by passably sociopathic, warmongering scoundrels. When they had pushed through the apartheid gates, they were inside a sort of foyer. There were more technicians running about, dressed in orange and blue jumpsuits, waving hand signals which meant nothing to anyone but them. Then they all felt a surge of power as the space was folded between where they were and the district which they were headed to. A gate technician with a gold helmet waved to several red hat technicians with glowing sticks. Then they began a strange dance, and the caravan began to move. It always made Deicide feel rather insignificant when he came upon a subject which he knew nothing about. Even when he was fed information from his amanuensis array, it was not as sufficient as him learning it himself. It was why Knott had stressed the importance of his core curriculum at an early age. It would be embarrassing to bear the pause of mentally dialing the amanuensis for a math equation, but fatal if he had to query the margin of error on an AP rifle. Deicide leaned over onto Hellmouth to get a better view of the city. She grinned as she remembered how excited he would get as a boy when they would visit anywhere that was not inside the skin of the ship. She caught the Great White looking at the two of them, a wry smile on his face. The old eaters shared a knowing glance. Neither of them had ever had any children of their own, but had always treated Deicide like a son. It was why they had continued to help Deicide in his mission to find a creature the Obtrusians called the Demiurge, Pretender God. Hellmouth blew towards the man's antennas, and Deicide turned his head sharply, puzzled at what she was smiling at. He then turned back to the tinted window and watched the city roll by, a towering skyline backlit by rays of artificial sunlight. Every building gave off a bluish hue, which could either be some state mandate or the work of some rogue somnus architect applying his overt and repugnant stamp. Just as well, so many great and lasting decisions have been arbitrarily chosen for these people. What more could a choice of color harm? Many districts were totally urbanized, as greenery, modified to grow in half-light, was only doled out to those districts that assimilated with the rest of the ship. To achieve this, the city would have to pull together to increase productivity, lower crime rates, and fight back corruption. Cities that accomplished this were seen as Edens, where even many of Deicide's more malevolent troops were prohibited. In such a status, residents were allowed to lie on flower beds of Eve, freeing them of any fiscal responsibilities, All occupations within these artificial heavens were totally creative in nature. Expression through artistic venues were highly encouraged. A complete inversion of the fringes, populated by washed-up griefers, cyborgs, and other graceless miscreants. These lands were seen as the front lawn of hell, but once fallen from this position, it would be the next stop.